Staff Sergeant Eric Mason opened his eyes to blinding light. His head throbbed with pain. The last thing he remembered was the attack on Colony Delta 7. The memory came back in flashes, plasma fire lighting up the night sky, screams of his fellow soldiers, and the clicking sounds of the alien Vraxians as they overwhelmed the human defenses. He tried to move but found himself strapped to a cold metal table. The room around him was stark and clinical, with strange equipment lining the walls. This was definitely not a human medical facility. "The specimen is awake," a harsh clicking voice said. Mason turned his head to see 3 tall insect-like creatures standing near the door. The Vraxian stood nearly 7 feet tall, with hard exoskeletons that gleamed under the bright lights. Their compound eyes reflected Mason's image back at him like twisted mirrors. "So this is what humans look like up close," said another Vraxian, moving closer to examine him. "Such soft skin, no natural armor, weak limbs. It's hard to believe they've resisted us for so long." Mason tested his restraints again. They were tight, but not painful. He kept his face blank, not wanting to show any reaction that might give these creatures satisfaction. "Do not waste your energy, human," the tallest Vraxian said. "Those restraints would hold creatures 3 times your strength." Mason finally spoke, his voice rough from disuse. "Where are the others from my squad?" The Vraxians made a series of rapid clicking sounds that Mason's translator implant interpreted as laughter. "Your fellow soldiers did not survive," the tall one said. "Only you showed enough interesting qualities to be worth keeping alive for study." Mason closed his eyes briefly, honoring the memory of his fallen comrades. Squad 12 had been together for 3 years, fighting on multiple planets against the Vraxian expansion. Now he was the only one left. "I am Chief Scientist Krazak," the tall Vraxian continued. "You are the first human soldier we have captured intact. Previous specimens were too damaged for proper study." "Lucky me," Mason muttered. This earned him another round of clicking laughter. "It does not understand its situation," one of the other Vraxians said. "Humans are known to use humor as a defense mechanism when frightened." Mason remained silent. Let them think he was afraid. Let them underestimate him. Every piece of information they revealed was something he could use later. The Vraxians moved him from the examination table to a transparent cell. The walls seemed to be made of some kind of advanced polymer, stronger than glass but just as clear. Perfect for observing a captive specimen. From his cell, Mason could see parts of what appeared to be a large laboratory. Other Vraxians moved about, working on equipment he didn't recognize. None of them paid him much attention after the initial excitement of his awakening. Mason carefully cataloged everything he saw. His special reconnaissance training had prepared him for capture scenarios. Rule 1. Gather intelligence. Rule 2. Assess escape options. Rule 3. Stay alive until extraction or escape is possible. He checked himself for injuries. His uniform had been replaced with a simple gray jumpsuit. The major wounds he'd sustained in the battle had been treated, though, not with the care a human doctor would have shown. His neural implant at the base of his skull seemed to have gone undetected. The Vraxians had either missed it or didn't recognize the small bump for what it was. That was their first mistake. The implant was standard issue for special reconnaissance operatives. It served multiple functions: translation, data storage, basic medical monitoring, and most importantly, emergency communication. If he could activate the beacon function, there was a chance a human ship might pick up the signal. Hours passed as Mason observed the Vraxian laboratory. He counted 6 different scientists and 4 guards. The guards carried weapons that resembled the plasma rifles he'd faced in battle. The scientists seemed more interested in their work than in him. Eventually, a smaller Vraxian approached his cell carrying what looked like a tray of food, if you could call the gray paste food. "Consume this," the Vraxian ordered, pushing the tray through a small opening in the cell wall. "It contains nutrients compatible with human physiology." Mason approached cautiously and examined the tray. Besides the gray paste, there was a container of clear liquid. He sniffed both cautiously. "It is not poisoned," the Vraxian said. That would defeat the purpose of keeping you alive. What is the purpose exactly? Mason asked, taking the tray. Study, research, understanding the enemy. The Vraxian's mandibles clicked softly. Humans have been more troublesome than anticipated. We wish to know why. Mason took a small taste of the paste. It was bland but not disgusting. The water tasted normal enough. How long have I been here? He asked. 3 of your Earth days, the Vraxian replied. You were unconscious for most of that time. 3 days. That meant the attack on Colony Delta 7 had happened 4 days ago. By now, Earth Command would know. The colony had fallen. They would be preparing a counterattack, but without intelligence about the Vraxian forces, they would be walking into the same trap his squad had. The Vraxian observed him eating with clinical interest. I am junior scientist, Thictral. I am assigned to monitor your biological functions. Mason nodded, storing the name in his memory. Do you have a name for me, or am I just the human? Thictral's head tilted slightly. Your designation in our records is Specimen H7, but our translator captured your human designation during the battle. You are called Eric Mason. Staff Sergeant. Eric Mason, Earth Defense Force and Special Reconnaissance Division. Mason corrected. Military protocol dictated he provide only name, rank, and service when captured. Your military rank is irrelevant here, Thictral said. You are no longer a soldier. You are a research subject. Another Vraxian, larger and with distinctive blue markings on its carapace, approached the cell. Is it communicating, Thictral? Yes, Commander Vexcor. Its speech functions are normal. The commander studied Mason with what seemed like contempt in its posture. Tomorrow we begin proper interrogation. Chief Scientist Krazak believes this specimen may have valuable military intelligence. I won't tell you anything, Mason said calmly. Commander Vexcor made that now familiar clicking laugh. They all say this at first, but humans break easily. Your bodies are not designed to withstand pain as ours are. Mason maintained eye contact with the commander. Try me. The Vraxian commander stepped closer to the transparent wall. I look forward to it, human. I have studied your species' weaknesses extensively. By the end of tomorrow, you will beg to tell me everything you know. After the commander left, Thictral lingered by the cell. Commander Vexcor speaks truth. No human has withstood our interrogation methods. It would be logical to cooperate immediately. Mason sat down on the small platform that served as a bed. Thanks for the advice. As night cycle began in the Vraxian ship, the lights dimmed in the laboratory. Only a few scientists remained, working quietly at their stations. Mason lay on his back, appearing to sleep, but his mind was racing. The Vraxians clearly thought humans were physically inferior. They saw his species as weak, easy to break. Their mockery and dismissive attitude revealed a critical flaw in their understanding. They had no idea what humans were truly capable of when pushed to their limits. Mason carefully activated his neural implant, using a series of specific thought patterns. The device hummed to life, undetectable to anyone but him. He began mapping the laboratory layout, recording Vraxian speech patterns and analyzing potential weaknesses in their security. Tomorrow they would try to break him. But Staff Sergeant Eric Mason had a different plan. Tomorrow, he would begin teaching the Vraxians exactly why humans had survived as a species for so long, and why mocking a captured human soldier was the biggest mistake they would ever make. Morning came with a harsh increase in lighting and the sound of many Vraxians entering the laboratory. Mason had slept little, spending most of the night using his neural implant to map the room and record the patterns of guard changes. He sat up straight when Commander Vexcor approached his cell with 4 armed guards. It is time, human, Vexcor said. Today we learn what secrets you hold. The transparent wall of Mason's cell slid open. 2 guards entered, weapons ready. They attached metal restraints to his wrists and ankles before leading him out. Mason didn't resist. Not yet. He needed to see more of the ship first. They marched him down a long corridor. Mason carefully counted his steps and noted every turn. Left, right, left. The ship was massive, much larger than human vessels. They passed other Vraxians who stopped to stare at him. Some made clicking sounds of disgust, others of curiosity. Finally, they reached a room with a single metal chair bolted to the floor in the center. The walls were dark metal and there were no windows. Various devices Mason didn't recognize lined one wall. Nothing about this room was good. The guards pushed him into the chair and secured his restraints to it. Commander Vexcor and Chief Scientist Krazak entered after them. "This will be simple, human," Vexcor said. "Answer our questions truthfully, and the pain will be minimal. Resist, and we will break you piece by piece." Mason met the commander's compound eyes without flinching. "Staff Sergeant Eric Mason, Earth Defense Force, Special Reconnaissance Division. That's all you're getting from me." Krazak moved to the wall of equipment and selected a small device. "Humans believe they are strong because they can endure pain. But there are many kinds of pain your species has never experienced." The first hour was just questions. How many ships in Earth's fleet? What were the coordinates of Earth's primary military bases? What defenses did the remaining human colonies have? Mason repeated his name, rank, and division each time, nothing more. The second hour was when the pain began. The device Krazak had selected created nerve sensations Mason had never felt before. It was like fire inside his veins. Yet there was no actual damage to his body. The Vraxians wanted him intact for further study. "Impressive tolerance," Krazak noted as Mason gasped for breath after a particularly intense session. "Most subjects begin pleading by now. Maybe you're not as good at torture as you think," Mason managed to say between breaths. This earned him another round with the device, longer this time. Mason bit his lip until it bled, refusing to scream. When they finally paused again, Vexcor leaned in close. "Why resist? Your human government has surely written you off as dead. No rescue is coming. You are alone here." Mason smiled through bloodied lips. "That's where you're wrong. No human soldier is ever forgotten or abandoned." "Such loyalty to a losing cause," Vexcor said with a dismissive click. "Your colonies fall, one by one. Earth will be next. Why suffer for a doomed species?" Despite the pain, Mason used this information. The Vraxians were planning to attack Earth directly. That was valuable intelligence if he could get it back to command. The interrogation continued for hours. Mason lost track of time, focusing only on enduring. Through it all, his neural implant recorded everything, storing data on Vraxian technology and tactics mentioned during the questioning. Eventually, Krazak called for a pause. "The specimen needs rest if we want useful data tomorrow. Its vital signs are approaching dangerous levels." Vexcor seemed disappointed but agreed. "Take it back to the cell. Provide basic medical treatment and nutrition." The guards unhooked Mason from the chair. He could barely stand, but he forced himself to walk rather than be dragged. Small victories mattered. Each step was agony, but he memorized the return path to his cell. Back in his transparent prison, junior scientist Zik Tral applied some kind of gel to his wounds. The relief was immediate. "You performed beyond expected human tolerances," Zik Tral said, sounding almost impressed. "Commander Vexcor is rarely frustrated." Mason leaned back against the wall. "Glad I could surprise you." "Why endure such suffering? The information they seek will be discovered eventually. The outcome of this war is statistically determined." Mason looked at the young Vraxian scientist. "That's the difference between our species. You think in certainties. We think in possibilities." Zik Tral's head tilted in that now familiar gesture of curiosity. "Explain." "You see our physical weaknesses and assume we're inferior. But humans have survived on Earth despite being weaker than most predators because we adapt. We find ways to turn disadvantages into strengths." "Fascinating perspective," Zigtral said, though scientifically unsound. Mason shrugged, wincing at the pain the movement caused. "You'll see." After Zigtral left, Mason lay down and closed his eyes. He needed to rest to recover as much strength as possible. But first he activated his neural implant again, processing the new data he had gathered. The layout of this section of the ship was becoming clearer. The interrogation room was 3 levels down from the laboratory. There were 4 guard stations. Between them, The ship's engine room, according to conversations he had overheard, was 2 levels below the laboratory in the opposite direction. Most importantly, he had learned that there were other human prisoners aboard. During his return journey, he had glimpsed a separate detention area with at least 6 cells. He had seen a human woman in one of them, though only briefly. She had looked up as he passed, and their eyes had met for just a moment. But in that moment, Mason had recognized a fellow soldier. Her posture, her alert eyes scanning for information. She was military, not a civilian colonist. He wasn't alone. Mason was pulled from his thoughts by a commotion outside his cell. A group of Vraxian guards was bringing in a new prisoner to a cell across from his. The human was struggling despite her restraints, making the guards click in annoyance. They shoved her roughly into the cell and activated the transparent wall. The woman immediately began examining her new prison, checking every corner methodically. Once the guards left, Mason sat up and caught her attention. She looked at him with surprise, then relief at seeing another human. Staff Sergeant Eric Mason, Special Reconnaissance, he said quietly, unsure if the cells were monitored for sound. Lieutenant Samantha Collins, 5th Marine Division, she replied just as quietly. How long have you been here? 4 days. Captured at Delta 7. You? 2 days. Our ship was ambushed near Proxima Station. She looked around cautiously before adding, They've been asking about Earth's defense grid. Mason nodded. Me too. They're planning something big. Collins moved closer to the transparent wall. Any chance of getting out of here, Sergeant? Mason glanced around to make sure no Vraxians were watching closely. Then he tapped the back of his neck subtly. Working on it. These bugs don't know everything about human technology. Collins' eyes widened slightly in understanding. She had recognized the reference to a neural implant. As a lieutenant, she would know about special reconnaissance equipment. They'll be coming for you tomorrow, Mason warned. They use some kind of neural stimulator. It hurts like hell, but it doesn't cause permanent damage. Thanks for the heads up, Collins said. Any advice? They hate being laughed at, Mason said with a small smile. And they're recording everything we say and do for research. Every piece of information we give them is one they can use against humans later. Collins nodded her understanding. Got it. As the laboratory's lighting dimmed for the night cycle, Mason felt something he hadn't expected to feel again so soon. Hope. With 2 of them, the chances of escape increased significantly, and if Lieutenant Collins also had useful intel, getting back to Earth became even more crucial. The Vraxians thought they had captured 2 weak humans for study and interrogation, but what they really had were 2 highly trained soldiers already, planning their escape. Tomorrow would bring more pain, but it would also bring opportunity, and humans were very good at seizing opportunities. 5 days had passed since Mason's capture. Each day followed the same pattern: interrogation, pain, return to his cell, brief conversations with Collins when the Vraxians weren't paying attention, and planning during the night cycles. Today was different, though. Today was the day they would make their move. Mason woke early, before the ship's lighting had fully brightened. His body still ached from yesterday's session, but he had endured worse. The Vraxians were becoming frustrated with his continued resistance. Yesterday, Commander Vexcor had threatened to begin more invasive procedures. We have been patient with you, human, Vexcor had said, but that patience ends tomorrow. Chief Scientist Krasiak has developed new methods that will extract information directly from your brain tissue. That had accelerated Mason's timeline. Brain scanning might reveal his neural implant. It was now or never. Across the laboratory, Collins was already awake. She caught his eye and gave a slight nod. They were ready. Junior Scientist Zigtral approached Mason's cell with the morning nutrition paste. This was the first part of their plan. Over the past days, Mason had built something resembling trust with the young scientist. Zigtral was curious about humans and often asked questions that went beyond his research parameters. Good morning, Specimen H7, Zigtral said, sliding the tray through the opening. Morning, Zictral, Mason replied, moving to take the tray. I've been wondering something about Vraxian biology. The scientist's antennae perked up with interest. What do you wish to know? Your exoskeleton. Is it uniform thickness throughout? Your body? Humans have vulnerable spots where bones are closer to the surface. Zictral seemed pleased by the scientific question. No, our protection varies. The thorax is most heavily armored, while joints and the underside of the neck have naturally thinner coverings to allow movement. Mason nodded, filing this information away. Fascinating. Evolution finds similar solutions across different worlds. As they spoke, Mason positioned himself carefully near the cell entrance. Across the room, Collins was doing the same. Indeed, Zictral agreed, though your soft exterior seems poorly designed for survival. We compensate in other ways, Mason said. For instance, our reaction speed. In one fluid motion, Mason thrust his arm through the food slot and grabbed Zictral's wrist, yanking the surprised Vraxian against the transparent wall. With his other hand, Mason reached through and pressed hard against the underside of the alien's neck, exactly where Zictral had just confirmed was vulnerable. The Vraxian made a choking sound, his mandibles clicking rapidly in distress. Mason increased the pressure until Zictral slumped unconscious. Using the scientist's own limb, Mason activated the cell door control on Zictral's wrist device. The transparent wall slid open. Mason dragged the unconscious scientist inside and quickly took his communication device and access card. He checked the laboratory. Only 2 other Vraxians were present, both focused on their work at the far end. Mason moved silently across the room to Collins's cell. He used Zictral's access card to open her door. Nice work, Sergeant, Collins whispered as she stepped out. What's next? Armory first, then engine room, Mason replied. We need to create enough chaos to mask our escape. They moved to the laboratory exit, keeping low. Mason used his neural implant to jam the door's security sensors for 10 seconds, long enough for them to slip through without triggering an alarm. In the corridor, they pressed against the wall as a patrol of Vraxian guards passed by. This way, Mason whispered, leading Collins down the path he had memorized during his trips to the interrogation room. They encountered a lone Vraxian at the next junction. Before the alien could react, Collins struck with military precision, at the neck joint, using the technique Mason had demonstrated. The Vraxian dropped without raising an alarm. You learned fast, Lieutenant, Mason said with approval. Marines are adaptable, Collins replied, taking the Vraxian's weapon. Plus, I've been wanting to do that for days. The weapon was a plasma-based rifle, similar to what had been used against them at Colony Delta 7. Collins checked its charge and settings while Mason kept watch. 2 levels down for the armory, Mason said. According to conversations I've overheard, it should be lightly guarded during shift changes. We have about 8 minutes. They used maintenance shafts rather than main corridors when possible. Mason's mapping of the ship over the past days proved accurate. When they reached the armory level, they encountered 2 guards. This time, stealth wasn't an option. Collins fired first, hitting one guard in the joint between thorax and leg. Mason tackled the second before it could sound an alarm, driving his fist into the vulnerable neck area. The guard's exoskeleton made a cracking sound, and it went limp. That won't stay quiet for long, Collins said. We need to move faster. The armory door required higher security clearance than Zictral's card provided. Mason connected his neural implant to the access panel, running the hacking program all special reconnaissance operatives carried. Come on, he muttered as the seconds ticked by. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside were racks of Vraxian weapons, armor, and explosives. Mason grabbed a handful of what looked like grenade equivalents while Collins collected more weapons. We need to find the other human prisoners, Collins said. There are at least 6 more according to what I've overheard. Mason nodded. They're being held 2 levels up from here, but first we need to create a diversion. They set the explosive devices with timers, placing them strategically around the armory. As they finished, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. They've discovered we're gone, Mason said. Plan B it is. Plan B was less subtle. They would fight their way to the engine room, overload the power core to disable the ship, then free the other prisoners during the chaos. They moved quickly through the corridors, no longer bothering with stealth. Any Vraxians they encountered were met with plasma fire or hand-to-hand combat. The aliens clearly hadn't expected humans to be so effective against physically superior opponents. As they reached the level of the engine room, the first explosives detonated. The ship shuddered, and emergency lighting kicked in. Vraxian voices chittered in panic over the communication systems. "This way," Mason said, leading Collins toward the engine room. "We have about 10 minutes before they organize a proper response." 4 Vraxian engineers guarded the engine room entrance. Mason and Collins took cover as plasma fire erupted around them. "Cover me," Mason said, preparing another explosive. Collins laid down suppressive fire while Mason activated the device and slid it toward the guards. The resulting explosion wasn't large, but it created enough smoke and confusion for them to advance. Inside the engine room, the Vraxian technology was unlike anything Mason had seen before. Massive crystal structures pulsed with energy, connected to what looked like organic components. "Any idea how to overload this?" Collins asked, setting up a defensive position at the door. Mason approached the main control panel. "My implant has been gathering data on their systems. Give me 2 minutes." As he worked, Collins held off the first wave of Vraxian security forces. The aliens were becoming more organized, their attacks more coordinated. "Whatever you're doing, do it faster," Collins shouted, ducking as plasma fire sizzled overhead. Mason's fingers flew over the alien controls, his neural implant translating the symbols. He wasn't trying to destroy the ship, just disable it long enough for them to free the other prisoners and find an escape pod. "Got it," he finally said. "Core overload in 60 seconds. It'll knock out power to everything except life support." They retreated from the engine room, sealing the door behind them. Mason used his implant to jam the lock, buying them extra time. "Now for the hard part," Collins said as they ran toward the detention level. Behind them, the ship's lights flickered. The engine core overload was beginning. Soon the Vraxians would learn an important lesson about underestimating humans, especially captured, angry human soldiers with nothing to lose. The ship shuddered as the engine core overload reached its peak. Lights flickered and died, plunging the corridors into darkness before emergency lighting slowly activated with a dim red glow. Mason and Collins moved quickly through the chaos, using the confusion to their advantage. Vraxian voices chittered in panic over the communication system. Emergency protocols were being enacted, but it was clear they had never dealt with this type of internal sabotage before. "Detention level should be 2 more sections ahead," Mason said, checking the small holographic map he had created using his neural implant. They encountered less resistance than expected. Most of the Vraxian security forces had been sent to the UI engine room or were searching the lower levels where the explosions had occurred. The few guards they did encounter were quickly overwhelmed by the combination of surprise and the humans' knowledge of their physical weaknesses. When they reached the detention level, they found 2 guards outside the main door. These were larger than the others they had faced, with heavier armor and what looked like more powerful weapons. "Elite guards," Mason whispered. "They won't go down easily." Collins studied the situation. "We need a distraction." Mason reached into the pouch where he had stored the remaining explosives. "I've got just the thing." He set a small charge on the wall of an adjacent corridor, then used Zictral's communication device to send a Vraxian distress signal from that location. When the explosive detonated, both guards immediately moved to investigate. "Simple but effective," Collins said with approval as they slipped past. Inside the detention area, they found 6 cells containing humans. Most were civilians from Colony. Delta 7, but 2 were military personnel, a pilot and a communications specialist. All looked up in shock when Mason and Collins entered. "Earth Defense Force," Mason announced. "We're getting you out of here." Using the access card, they quickly freed the prisoners. The civilians were frightened but determined. The 2 military personnel, Lieutenant Greg Peters and Sergeant Maria Ortiz, immediately asked for weapons. "What's the plan, sir?" Peters asked Collins, recognizing her higher rank. "We've disabled the main engines temporarily," Collins explained. "We need to reach the escape pod bay on level 2 before they restore power." Mason distributed the weapons they had collected. "The Vraxians are vulnerable at the neck joints and under the arms. Aim there if you have to fight." Ortiz, the communications specialist, approached Mason. "Sergeant, I overheard the Vraxians talking. They have important tactical data in their command center about the planned attack on Earth. If we could access that..." Mason exchanged looks with Collins. They both knew the value of such intelligence. "Where's the command center?" Collins asked. "1, level up forward section," Ortiz replied. "But it will be heavily guarded." Mason made a quick decision. "Lieutenant, you get these people to the escape pods. I'll go for the command center data." Collins frowned. "That's a suicide mission, Sergeant. Not if I use their systems against them," Mason said, tapping his neural implant. "I can download their tactical database if I can get to a main terminal, 5 minutes in and out." Collins didn't like it, but she understood the importance of the intelligence. "You have 20 minutes to reach the escape pods before we launch. After that, I know," Mason said. "If I'm not there, go without me. Earth needs to know what's coming." They split up at the next junction. Mason watched as Collins led the group toward the escape pod bay, then turned and headed for the command center. His neural implant guided him through the ship's corridors, avoiding the largest concentrations of Vraxian security forces. As he approached the command center, he encountered Commander Vex Kor leading a group of guards. "The human specimen!" Vex Kor chittered in surprise and rage. "Capture it alive!" Mason didn't wait for them to attack. He fired his plasma weapon at the ceiling above the Vraxians, causing debris to rain down on them. In the confusion, he slipped, head running full speed toward the command center. 2 more guards stood at the entrance. Mason didn't slow down. He fired at one and tackled the other, driving his elbow into the vulnerable neck joint he had learned about from Zikatral. The guard went down hard. Inside the command center, 3 Vraxian officers turned in shock at his entrance. Mason fired, rapidly, not aiming to kill but to force them away from the control terminals. When they took cover, he rushed to the main console, his neural implant connected to the Vraxian system. Years of special reconnaissance training had prepared him for just this type of mission, extracting critical intelligence from enemy territory. The implant began downloading the tactical database, filtering for information about the planned attack on Earth. "You continue to surprise us, human," a voice said from behind him. Mason turned to see Chief Scientist Krazak entering the command center, flanked by 4 elite guards. Unlike the others, Krazak didn't seem angry or frightened. He appeared curious. "Even now you gather intelligence rather than simply escaping," the scientist observed. Fascinating behavior. Mason kept the download running in the background as he faced the Vraxians. "We're just full of surprises." "Indeed. When we captured you, we thought we had found a simple soldier. Now I realize we captured something far more valuable, a perfect example of human adaptability and resourcefulness, the very qualities that make your species dangerous." The download was at 70%. Mason needed to buy more time. "Then you understand why your attack on Earth will fail," he said. Krazak's mandibles clicked in what Mason had come to recognize as amusement. "Perhaps, or perhaps we will adapt our approach based on what we have learned from you." The guards moved forward slowly, weapons ready. Mason knew he couldn't defeat all of them, but he only needed a few more seconds for the download to complete. "You know what the biggest mistake you made was?" Mason asked, backing up slightly to keep all the Vraxians in view. "Enlighten me," Krazak said. "You kept mocking us, treating us like we were inferior. If you'd respected humans as worthy opponents from the beginning, you might have checked me more thoroughly and found my implant." The scientist's compound eyes narrowed. "Implant?" The download reached 100%. Mason smiled. "Too late now." He threw his last explosive device at the ceiling. The blast was controlled but effective, creating a shower of debris and smoke. In the confusion, Mason dove through a side exit, sealing the door behind him. Alarms blared throughout the ship. The Vraxians were now fully aware of the threat he posed. Mason ran through the corridors, using his implant's map to navigate the shortest route to the escape pod bay. Time was running out. Behind him, he could hear the heavy footsteps of pursuing guards. Ahead, a security door began to close. Mason pushed himself harder, sliding under the descending door with inches to spare. His neural implant indicated he was now on level 2. The escape pod bay was just ahead. As he rounded the final corner, he saw Collins standing at the entrance to an open pod, weapon ready. "Cutting it close, Sergeant," she called out. "Just wanted to make it interesting, Lieutenant," he replied, sprinting toward her as plasma fire erupted behind him. Mason dove into the escape pod as Collins laid down, covering fire. The door sealed shut behind them, and Collins hit the launch controls. The pod detached from the Vraxian ship with a jolt. Inside, the other humans looked at Mason with relief and hope. He checked his neural implant, confirming that the tactical data was intact and secure. "Did you get it?" Collins asked quietly. Mason nodded. "Everything. Their entire attack plan for Earth. Fleet positions, timelines, targets. Command is going to have a very interesting briefing when we get home." As their pod accelerated away from the Vraxian ship, Mason looked back through the viewport. The massive, alien vessel was still in emergency mode, parts of it dark from the power disruption they had caused. "You think they learned their lesson about underestimating humans?" Collins asked. Mason smiled grimly. "If not, they're about to. This data will give Earth the advantage it needs. The Vraxians thought they were studying us, but we were studying them too. And we're faster learners." The escape pod's communication system activated, beginning its automated distress signal. Now all they had to do was stay alive long enough for a human ship to find them. Behind them, the Vraxian ship began to power up its engines again. The hunt wasn't over yet. The escape pod hurtled through space, its small engines pushing to maximum capacity. Inside, the 8 humans watched tensely as the massive Vraxian ship grew smaller in their viewport. But it wasn't disappearing fast enough. "They're powering up their main engines," Lieutenant Peters said, monitoring the pod's basic sensor display. "They'll catch us in minutes." Mason checked the pod's systems. It was designed for short-range escape, not outrunning a warship. "Any response to our distress signal?" Communications specialist Ortiz shook her head. "Nothing yet. We're still too far from any human outposts." Collins looked at Mason. "Ideas?" Mason connected his neural implant to the pod's communication system, boosting its signal strength. "The tactical data I stole includes their communication frequencies and codes. Maybe we can use that." Working quickly, Mason used the implant to craft a message in the Vraxian language, matching the format of their military communications. He sent it on their emergency channel. "What did you just do?" Collins asked. "Sent a fake distress call that appears to come from a Vraxian scout ship," Mason explained, "claiming they're under attack by a human battle cruiser in a nearby sector." Peters looked impressed. "Will they fall for that?" "Maybe not for long, but we don't need long," Mason said. "We just need them to hesitate." On the sensor display, they watched as the Vraxian ship suddenly changed course, heading toward the coordinates Mason had included in the fake message. "It worked," one of the civilians exclaimed. "For now," Mason cautioned. "They'll figure it out soon enough." Collins took charge. "Ortiz, keep sending our distress signal on all human frequencies. Peters, find us somewhere to hide. An asteroid field, debris cloud, anything. There's a small moon orbiting a gas giant about 20 minutes away at our current speed," Peters said after checking the nav system. "Its magnetic field might help mask our signature." "Do it," Collins ordered. As Peters adjusted their course, Mason continued working with his neural implant, reviewing the stolen tactical data. What he found made his blood run cold. The Vraxians have gathered their entire fleet for the attack. "On Earth?" he told Collins quietly. 17 warships, each carrying thousands of troops they plan to launch in 3 days. Collins cursed under her breath. "Earth's defenses can't handle that many ships at once." "No, but they might not have." "Two," Mason said, his mind racing. The data shows their attack formation and command structure. Their entire strategy relies on coordinated attacks directed by the lead ship. Can we use that somehow? Before Mason could answer, Ortiz called out excitedly, "I've got something. A human signal." Everyone turned to her as she adjusted the communications array. A voice crackled through the speakers. "Unknown escape pod, this is Earth Defense Force Destroyer Valiant. We received your distress call. Identify yourselves." Relief washed over the group. Collins responded immediately. "Valiant, this is Lieutenant Samantha Collins, 5th Marine Division. We have 8 humans aboard, escaped prisoners from a Vraxian warship. Request immediate extraction." "Confirmed, Lieutenant. We have your position. Hold course. ETA 19 minutes. As the pod continued toward the moon, Mason worked with Ortiz to transmit the tactical data to the Valiant. "They need to see this immediately," he explained. "It could change everything about how we fight this war." 16 minutes later, the EDI Earth Destroyer came into view, sleek and powerful, its weapons already deployed in case of Vraxian pursuit. The ship's tractor beam locked onto their pod, drawing them into its landing bay. When the pod door opened, they were met by armed Marines who quickly secured the area before confirming their identities. Captain Ellen Rivera, the Valiant's commander, greeted them personally. "Lieutenant Collins, Sergeant Mason," she said, saluting. "We've received your data transmission. Our analysts are reviewing it now." She led them to the bridge, where tactical officers were already studying the stolen Vraxian attack plans on large displays. "This is the most significant intelligence coup of the war," Captain Rivera said. "With this information, we can prepare a proper defense." Mason stepped forward. "Captain, I believe we can do more than defend. The Vraxians have a fatal flaw in their command structure. Their entire fleet operates on a synchronized attack protocol directed by their flagship." He pointed to the display showing the Vraxian fleet formation. "If we can disrupt or take out their command ship, the rest of the fleet will be thrown into disarray." Rivera looked thoughtful. "Interesting theory, but their flagship will be heavily defended." "Yes, but they don't know that we have their codes and protocols," Mason said. "Using what I downloaded, we could approach using their own recognition signals," Collins added. "The Vraxians think humans are inferior. They won't expect us to understand their technology well enough to use it against them." Captain Rivera studied the tactical display. A surgical strike on their command ship? Risky, but if successful, it could save Earth. She turned to her communications officer. "Send all this to Earth Command immediately. Request reinforcements at these coordinates." Over the next 2 days, 5 more Earth ships joined the Valiant at their position just outside Vraxian sensor range. Admiral William Keene arrived on the flagship Defiance to take command of the operation. In the Defiance's briefing room, Mason and Collins presented their plan to the assembled officers. Using the stolen data, they had crafted a strategy that played to human strengths, adaptability and unconventional thinking. The Vraxians rely on strict protocols and coordinated actions. Mason explained. They don't improvise well. If we disrupt their command structure, their numerical advantage becomes meaningless. Admiral Keene approved the plan. A strike team would infiltrate the Vraxian flagship using a captured shuttle and the stolen communication codes. Once aboard, they would plant explosives at key points to disable rather than destroy the ship. "Sergeant Mason will lead the infiltration team," Keene announced, as the one most familiar with Vraxian ship layouts and security systems. Mason nodded, accepting the assignment. After the briefing, Collins approached him in the corridor. "Just like that, you're going back into the lion's den," she said. "Someone has to," Mason replied, "and I've already given them the slip once." Collins smiled. "And this time you'll have proper backup." She tapped the mission roster on her tablet, showing that she had been assigned to his team. The day of the Vraxian attack arrived. The Earth fleet waited in position as the 17 enemy warships assembled. Using the captured shuttle and stolen codes, Mason's team approached the Vraxian flagship, transmitting the appropriate recognition signals. "They're clearing us to dock," Ortiz said from the communication station. "They think we're a supply shuttle from one of their support ships." Mason looked at his team. Collins, Peters, Ortiz, and 4 Special Forces operators. Remember, quick and quiet. Plant the charges at the designated points, then we extract. The Earth fleet will handle the rest. As they docked with the massive Vraxian flagship, Mason couldn't help but appreciate the irony. Just days ago, he had been a prisoner on a similar ship, mocked and tortured by aliens who thought humans were weak and inferior. Now he was returning, leading a mission that would decide the fate of Earth. The Vraxians had made a critical error when they captured him. They had studied humans as specimens rather than respecting them as enemies. They had mocked what they didn't understand, and they were about to pay the price for that mistake. As the docking clamps engaged and the team prepared to board, Mason activated his neural implant one last time. For all those who didn't make it, "Off Colony Delta 7, he said quietly. "Let's show these bugs why humans are the most dangerous species in the galaxy."